Otto Herbert Gille was a German military officer who served in the Waffen SS during the Second World War. His life followed the arc of many men who entered the Nazi system as ambitious young soldiers and became part of an organization responsible for widespread suffering, destruction, and the deaths of millions. Understanding his life means looking closely at the path that brought him into the SS, the roles he held during the war, and the ways he contributed to a regime built on violence and racist ideology. His story is tied not only to the battles he fought, but also to the moral choices he made as he rose through an organization that committed crimes on an enormous scale. Gille was born on March 23, 1897, in Gandersheim, a small town in Germany. His early years were shaped by the social atmosphere of the late German Empire, which valued military service, loyalty to the state, and discipline. Like many young men of his generation, he grew up in a world where nationalism and the idea of military honor were presented as central virtues. When the First World War began in 1914, he was 17 years old, and 2 years later, he joined the German army. The war exposed him to the violence and hardship that marked the trenches, but it also gave him his first glimpse of the military life that would shape the rest of his career. After the war ended in 1918, Germany was left in political and economic turmoil. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed harsh restrictions on the German military, and many former soldiers struggled to find their place in a society facing inflation, political clashes, and deep social divides. Gille stayed connected to former military circles, like many veterans who felt disillusioned and angry about Germany's defeat. This environment became fertile ground for extremist movements, including those that would later support Adolf Hitler's rise to power. During the 1920s and early 1930s, Gille worked as a police officer, a job that offered stability and drew on his military experience. Germany's police forces during this period recruited many former soldiers who missed the structure and identity that military life had provided. When the Nazi Party gained influence, police organizations and military veterans became natural places for the party to recruit support. Gille, like many others, was drawn toward the growing nationalist rhetoric and promises of restoring German pride. Gille joined the SS in 1931, 2 years before the Nazi Party took control of Germany. At the time he joined, the SS was still a relatively small organization, but it was being built into a loyal elite force meant to serve Hitler and the aims of the Nazi state. The group demanded strict obedience and loyalty to Nazi racial ideology. Gille's early involvement meant he became part of the system before it fully transformed into the powerful structure it would later become. As the Nazis took power in 1933, the SS expanded rapidly, and Gille advanced within its ranks. He trained new recruits and served in several leadership roles as the SS reorganized and strengthened itself. The Waffen SS, which would later become the armed wing of the SS, grew from small guard units into a major military force. Gille positioned himself as a disciplined and reliable officer, which helped him rise through the internal hierarchy. During the late 1930s, he took command roles in what would become the SS Division Viking. This division was unusual in that it recruited volunteers from outside Germany, mostly from Scandinavia, the Netherlands, and other parts of Europe. The Nazi leadership tried to present these foreign volunteers as fellow believers in Nazi racial ideology. As a commander, Gille was responsible for training them, organizing units, and preparing the division for the war Hitler was planning. When the Second World War began in 1939, the Waffen SS was still relatively small compared with the regular German army, but it grew rapidly as Hitler demanded more forces. Gille became one of the key officers in the SS Viking Division, which fought primarily on the Eastern Front after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. Life on the Eastern Front was marked by extreme violence, vast distances, and brutal weather. German forces advanced quickly at first, but they soon faced fierce Soviet resistance. The fighting was vicious, and the Nazi government expected SS divisions not only to fight, but also to enforce the regime's racial policies, which included the killing of civilians, political prisoners, and Jewish communities. While Gille was known mainly as a front-line commander, rather than an officer involved in administrative killings, he was part of a military system deeply tied to these crimes. The Waffen SS, as an institution, served a regime that pursued genocide and oppression in every territory it occupied. Gille gained a reputation among his peers for persistence and toughness. He was wounded several times, which added to his standing within the SS, since the organization celebrated officers who suffered frontline injuries. As the war continued, he rose to command a regiment and eventually the entire division. Under his leadership, the Viking Division fought in Ukraine, the Caucasus region, and later in defensive battles as the German forces were pushed back by the growing strength of the Red Army. By 1943 and 1944, the tide of war had turned against Germany. The Soviet Union had regained large areas of lost territory, and the German military was being steadily driven westward. The Waffen SS attempted to form new units, including a larger corps structure, and Gille was placed in command of the SS Panzer Corps that included both the Viking Division and the SS Nordland Division. These units took part in desperate battles during the German retreat, including fighting in Poland and the Baltic region. The situation was increasingly hopeless, but Hitler ordered his forces to resist at all costs, even when resistance offered no strategic benefit. As an SS general, Gille had significant authority over thousands of soldiers. He was responsible for military planning, logistics, and tactical decisions during some of the war's hardest fighting. His corps suffered heavy losses, and the shrinking German front left little room for maneuver. Throughout this period, the Nazi leadership continued carrying out mass murder in concentration camps, ghettos, and occupied territories. Even officers whose primary duties were military contributed to the survival and function of the broader system that made these atrocities possible. In the final months of the war, Gille's corps fought in Hungary during Operation Spring Awakening, the last major German offensive launched in early 1945. The operation failed quickly, and German forces were pushed back toward Austria. By this time, the German command structure was collapsing. Supplies were scarce, communication lines broke down, and many units dissolved under pressure. Gille's corps continued fighting retreating battles until Germany's surrender in May 1945. When the war ended, Gille was taken into American custody. Many high-ranking SS officers were tried for war crimes, but Gille was not prosecuted. Instead, he spent time in internment before being released. His post-war life was quieter than his wartime career. He lived in West Germany, worked in civilian roles, and attempted to distance himself from the crimes of the SS. Like many former SS members, he claimed that the Waffen SS had been a purely military organization, even though historical evidence clearly shows the opposite. The Waffen SS served a criminal state, received training rooted in Nazi ideology, and took part in actions that supported oppression and genocide. Gille died on December 26, 1966, in Stemmen, Germany. His life reflects the path of many German officers who devoted themselves to a violent and destructive regime. Understanding his story helps illuminate how ordinary ambitions, loyalty to authority, and a desire for status can become tied to systems that cause enormous harm. His career cannot be separated from the crimes of the organization he served. Even though he focused on military leadership rather than direct involvement in the administration of death camps or political repression, he was still part of an armed force created to enforce the goals of a government built on racism and brutality. Today, historians view Gille not as a hero or tragic figure, but as one of many officers whose skills and discipline helped prolong a war that devastated Europe. His actions contributed to the suffering of millions, whether through military destruction on the battlefield or through the larger purpose of the SS, which existed to support a regime responsible for genocide. His story is a reminder that people who rise through the ranks of harmful systems often see themselves as simply doing their jobs, even when those jobs make them part of a much larger pattern of violence. Although some former members of his division attempted after the war to present themselves as honorable soldiers fighting for their country, modern research has shown that this image was shaped by post-war myth-making rather than historical truth. The divisions Gille commanded operated in territories where mass killings took place and were part of campaigns that destroyed entire towns and villages. None of this can be separated from the identity of the Waffen SS or the goals of Nazi Germany. Gille's life spans 2 world wars, the collapse of an empire, the rise of dictatorship, and the most destructive conflict in human history. His career shows how individuals can become deeply involved in dangerous ideologies when their sense of duty, loyalty, or ambition leads them to ignore the consequences of the systems they serve. Thanks for watching. If you have a thought about Otto Gille, drop a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe,